Sharon Norton from Mennonite Mission Network, and this video workshop is on the topic of networking for the kingdom, discipleship, church planting, and climate justice around the world. And you might be asking yourself, what is the connection between all of those different things to networking? So that's what we'll be talking about, and you'll see the connection in just a minute. So first we'll have from Australia, Johannes Meier. He's part of the Bruderhof community there in New South Wales, and he'll be sharing about how regenerative farming practices are an expression of their Christian discipleship and commitment and obedience to Christ. Next, we'll have Gordon McDade coming to us from Belfast, Northern Ireland, and he will be talking about church planting and disciple making in a context where many people are very skeptical of institutional religion, and also in the crossroads between Catholics and Protestants who continue to experience conflict and hostility between their communities. And we'll talk about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus in that place and to be centered on Jesus, to provide a hospitable place, a place of generosity, of spirit and mutuality, and how networking with other ministries like Mission Network Sent program has been a blessing and strengthened their own ministry. Next, we have Jaime Ramirez from Iglesia, Cristiana, Menonita de Colombia, or the Colombian Mennonite Church, and he will be sharing about his experience as a church planter and include how his participation in the Sent Network, which is a church planting online training of Mennonite Mission Network, which he participated in while he was planting a church, and how that experience strengthened his work. He will also share about his entrepreneurial background and how that has impacted his ministry there with the church planting, including bringing the vision for a church building into reality that can be used for multiple purposes. And finally, we'll be hearing from Lionel Nkosi from Zimbabwe. And he will be sharing about how the missional discipleship initiative of Mission Network has impacted his whole orientation to ministry, basically going back to the most foundational, basic thing of our faith. It taught him to leave behind this mindset of being a vendor of Christian goods and services to being a sent people, sent by Jesus to be disciples and to make disciples. So the whole point of missional discipleship is to be more Christ-like and to walk with others as they become more Christ-like. So we hope that these videos are educational for you as well as inspirational, and that you can take something with you and apply it in your setting, no matter where you are. I'm happy to have Gordon McDade here with me from Soul Space near Belfast, Northern Ireland. Gordon, we met finally in person in April of this year after getting to know each other through the Sent Network of Mission Network, the Church Planting Network, and multiple emails and video calls back and forth. And so it's my pleasure to interview you for this Mennonite World Conference video where we're talking about networking for the kingdom. And so in getting to know you, I've learned that you are a master networker. You are connected all over the place for lots of different ministry purposes. So before we get into the networking piece, could you just describe a little bit about the Soul Space community and your ministry context there in the Belfast area?
Sure. So Soul Space is an intentional Christian community with a Celtic Christian flavor, particularly to it, with strong Anabaptist roots to what we do. So we work in interface areas between communities divided by peace walls in North and West Belfast. So our context is a post-conflict one in a city that is still divided. There are more peace walls now than there were during the conflict, although that's nothing really compared to the walls that there still are in people's hearts and minds. So our particular ministry model is one that is centered on networking, really. And that is that we run a community chaplaincy service, which is based on building strong relationships on either side of peace walls and across our city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so community chaplaincy, that was a new term for me. Can you just describe a little bit what you mean when you say that?
Sure. So community chaplaincy is something that we developed over years of being involved in church planting, where we realized that the model that we wanted to develop wasn't based on inviting people to come to us, because people wouldn't come to us. There was a lot of suspicion in Ireland around the church and its history and whatever. And so we developed this model whereby we go out into the community and we seek to discover what God is already doing, because we have learned over the years that the work of God is not confined to the church, but that God is already at work through all kinds of people in communities in all kinds of diverse ways. And he was in our communities before we got there. He'll be there long after we've left. And so community chaplaincy means going into the community, seeing what God is doing, seeing what people are doing and joining in and building relationships and supporting and encouraging the good things that are already happening. And so that's what chaplaincy is about. It's about being outward facing rather than inward looking.
Yeah. And that does say a lot about your context too in Europe, in post-Christendom, especially postmodernism, all of that, where people are, so very suspicious of church and institutions in general. And so, I can understand this kind of missional impulse to go be with people where they are. Absolutely.
And one of the big challenges, Sharon, that we have found is that authenticity is really important to the post-Christendom mind. So people are looking for a genuineness and a transparency because they're very quick to see through any kind of pretense. And so for us, networking actually begins with who we are, and the Jesus likeness and the Jesus fragrance that we bring wherever we go. So there is a real challenge to personal discipleship, so that when we're networking, we're coming with, I hope, a degree of honesty, authenticity, realism, to share not just words, but to share lives, actions, attitudes, and try to be as like Jesus as his Spirit would enable us to be.
Sounds kind of like, you live your life sort of out loud, transparently, things that you might, keep for yourself, thoughts, attitudes, like you were just saying. Maybe you are slightly more overt in a relationship, and building a friendship so people know where you're coming from, maybe in a different way, so that they know you're not some sort of like trying to put on a show or impress people, or like, if you just follow these steps, you'll be a super Christian, something like that. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, I know whenever I did the Scent Network course, which I found hugely helpful, and actually broadened my network really, again, one of the things about being part of a network that has sentness at the heart of it, I think has been really helpful for me in providing a framework for the networking that I do, because there is a sense of being missional in everything that I'm really about. So we have realized that people are spiritual, but they may not necessarily be churched. We've found that Jesus is really well thought of and popular, but those who follow him are not necessarily always thought of as being as popular. So there's a real challenge to recognizing that the commissioning words of Jesus to his disciples are as real for us today, and the challenge, I think, modeled by Jesus for incarnational living, and to be full of grace and truth and love, and to be sent, and to try and live with a degree of normality and every day. We're very into the everyday faith. It's nothing special. It's living close to Jesus, living close to the world, and bringing the world and Jesus together.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, that's the challenge of what we try to do.
You say that so beautifully. It's so profound, and when people really live that out, it really truly does make a difference, and it makes an impact in people's lives and in communities. And you have such a different context there with all of the troubles of the past between the Catholics and the Protestants, and people loyal to the UK and people who want to have one Ireland, and you're right there in that nexus. So how do you work at networking between these communities that may just really hate each other?
Well, it's not without its challenges. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's something that we have taken an enormous amount of time and at times a significant amount of risk to try and build the relationships. Mm-hmm. So where we minister has peace walls. On either side of those peace walls, there are really good people who have a heart for their community. Mm-hmm. They're fearful and they're hurt, and they carry a lot of hurt from the past. And there's a divided history and a divided perspective. And identity really is at the heart of the Northern Irish issue, really, I think going back in time. So what we have tried to do is to take time to build relationships and to earn trust. Mm. That has been, and this is part of the risk, I think, joining residence groups, getting to know local politicians of different flavors, getting involved in community initiatives that aren't necessarily Christian initiatives, helping with tidying up streets, helping with just trying to be a positive influence. And then we hope that our presence and our authenticity and being open about who we are will lead and has led to a curiosity from people. And sometimes we can be a bit of a mystery to them because we work on both sides of the wall and we work with different groups of people and we try to be who we are with everybody that we meet. And then what we try to do then is to be bridge builders, and we try to forge relationships across gaps and forge relationships across politics and forge relationships across identities. Mm-hmm. That can be risky. Yeah. It hasn't always worked. But I think there is something about, I think networking needs to be courageous. Mm-hmm. I think it's time for risk taking and the possibility of being misunderstood. And I think it's time to reach out a hand, even if a hand doesn't come back towards you. But there's something about being in that. It's a place of vulnerability, I think, and runs the risk of being rejected. But I think the way of Jesus is to take up your cross daily. And I think part of that is running the risk of even your own people, whoever you decide they are, not understanding what you're doing. So networking can be risky. It can be safe, but it can also be risky. And we think it's a time for stepping out and taking a few risks.
Yeah. I can see too, that sense of being misunderstood. But I imagine you experience also some measure of resistance, like how could you, how dare you, don't you know who they are? You should be on our side. And how do you keep going through the resistance? Because obviously you're still going. You've been doing this for some 20 years in different forms.
Sometimes it feels like 50 years. Sometimes it feels like 5 years.
Yeah.
It depends on the day you get us.
Yeah.
How do we keep going? We find real strength in one another. So working in a team is a really important thing, I think, for us. But I think we've also learned that, and I think this is something of what Jesus taught as well, we look out for people of peace within our communities. I think I learned that on the Sent Network course as well. There was something about finding the people of peace. And so for us, we have made significant friends within the communities where we work and worked hard at deeper friendships with those people. And actually, we have learned a lot from some of the community workers and some of the community activists who have walked where we are now walking. And so we've learned from their experience, actually, and that's been really helpful. Sometimes we do take time out and we go to the beach or we get a couple of weeks off and we try not to burn ourselves out too much. And we do have friends, people like Sharon Norton of the Mennonite Mission Network and others who have been such an encouragement to us, and whose friendship we really value and whose encouragement we really value. So even within our networking, there's a very close, tight network, and then there's a wider network, I think, as well, that keeps us going. Solitary working is really not, I think, what Jesus wants us to be about.
Yeah, I agree. There's too much at stake. There is a lot of risk, especially when you step out in ways that face rejection and resistance. Yeah, you definitely need that team and to know who your people are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes those people will surprise you. Sometimes actually we have found the warmest reception where we didn't expect to find it. I think God is still a God of surprises.
Sure.
And sometimes when we see who's in our network and who we've had the opportunity to meet, we're really quite surprised by who those people are and grateful to God. And we realize that God sometimes works through all manner of people in a whole variety of ways. And there's something about, and I think this is part of networking as well, it's seeing where is God at work and in whom is God at work, and being part of what God is already doing. We don't start it, we join in what God's already doing. It's having the eyes to see what the Spirit is doing and joining in.
Yeah, all I can say is amen to that. That is a great place to finish our conversation. And thank you so much, Gordon, for sharing your thoughts on networking for the kingdom.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
Greetings from D'Anthonia, Bruderhof community in northern New South Wales. It's a real joy to join all of you for a few minutes at the Mennonite World Conference and share some of what we've been doing here at D'Anthonia in the way of landscape restoration. So D'Anthonia is a Bruderhof community with about 200 brothers, sisters, and children. We've been here in New South Wales for about 22 years. Myself and my family came here in 2004, so we've been here about 18 years. And we do have a long-standing history with the Mennonites. For myself personally, both my parents were children and then came into adulthood in the Paraguay communities back in the 1940s and 50s. And at that time, there was a lot of contact with the Mennonites, and we received a lot of help as we transitioned from a first world country to the Chaco and then the jungles and savannas of Paraguay. My dad then grew up as a gaucho. He did a lot of cattle work. Myself, my life started in New York State, and where I first became a nurse. So I worked in healthcare for some years before traveling down here and then taking on management of our property. We have about 2,300 hectares here, mostly grazing country, some cropping. It's been quite a journey of discovery and of reconnecting with the old ways of managing land to its full potential. We feel really that this is part of our Christian witness, part of the obedience to God's commands to care for the land, to care for His creation. And when we do that, then the creation and the land looks after us, provides us healthy food. So that's a really important journey that we've been on. Today we're standing down by our creek. You can see behind me the water's flowing through. We recently had a big rain, and the properties upstream have given us some more topsoil, bit of erosion going on. But I just want to tell you a little bit about our story. When we bought this property in 1999, it was significantly degraded already. It was a mixed farming, cropping enterprise. And we came down to Australia with a vision to reintegrate with agriculture and to work with the land. And we began that journey really by following conventional practice, using herbicides, tillage, a lot of cropping, but we couldn't make any money at that, and we could see that the landscape was continuing to degrade and not improve. Often this creek would be empty. There'd be no water flowing through it. There was erosion throughout the catchment. The pastures were not productive, and the crops were not paying their bills. So about 5 years into that, we really stopped and considered, what is a responsible way to go forward with this land? How can we do a better job of looking after it? And really also, what kind of a landscape are we going to pass on to our children? And what's going to support them? Tied into all of that, of course, too, was the looming issue of climate change, which we're now experiencing across the world. And what about the way we manage our landscape can mitigate against some of the challenges that climate change bring? So, how to restore landscape? That is a question with many layers of answers, and it's taken us many, many years to learn what we have been able to learn, and I'm sure there's much more to learn still. But to boil it down, we've come to really understanding that we have to work with nature, with the laws of nature, with the way God set it up to work. The cycles of fertility, the cycles of water, the cycles of energy, sun's energy, and then down into the soil, the life in the soil, the biology, the way that plants and soil biology work together. All these things are important, but really we didn't know any of that at the beginning. But we began by doing what we could, and the first tool that we applied to our landscape was grazing management, which replicates the way that grazing animals interact with predators and are kept in tight bunches, moving through the landscape, doing pretty aggressive grazes, but then long rest periods. And by using this grazing management tool, you can actually restore grasslands and restore diversity, restore ecology. That was one tool, and we applied that first in a small area and then in bigger and bigger areas across the property, and that was successful to a degree. However, that was not enough. We also met a gentleman by the name of Peter Andrews, who taught us about water in the landscape, the importance of retaining water in the landscape, because Australia, as you may know, is a land of extremes. It's either very dry or very wet. And the landscape and the functions in the landscape work to hold that water in place. But what's happened over the past 150 years in Australia is that through mismanagement, those functions have been destroyed, and vast amounts of very valuable topsoil have been washed out to sea. Fertility has been decreased, soil carbon has been decreased, and these things have had a huge impact on farming viability in this country. So we worked hard at learning and understanding what it meant to restore water in the landscape. And that starts at the very top of the hills and moves down through the slopes right down to the creek as we see it here. And the connection between the creek and the water and the floodplain. The level of the water in the creek actually extends out into the floodplain, and the grass roots can access that water and continue to productively grow. The next chapter in our discoveries was around soil biology and plant diversity. And if you think about nature, nature never exists in monocultures, but nature is always diverse. There is millions of species of plants, animals, insects, birds, and all these things play an important role in the natural world. And so we realized that through the use of herbicides, through the use of monocultures, we had severely degraded our landscape, and it was really on life support. And you could almost look at the chemical fertilizers we've used as drugs that would stimulate the soil for a very short time, but then cause long-term damage, much like drugs do in our bodies. So those are the things that we have applied to our landscape, have been very successful. The land has come alive. We're seeing increasing birds, insects, animals, many more plant species, and it's heading in the right direction, but we're still really in the beginning stages of full property recovery. I think too, and I think about this as a Christian, that when one looks at nature and the wonder of nature and the way God has created it, the way that the plants and the soil biology, the animals, the birds, they all need each other. They all work together to achieve this community. Isn't that the way we humans should be, working together to achieve God's plan on this earth? And yes, we do have a 2,300 hectare property. It's a big place, but each of you viewing this, you know, whether you have a window box of flowers or a small acreage or a backyard, can apply these principles in some way and increase, you know, the health of the ecosystem wherever you are. And considering the challenges we face in our world, as I mentioned before, with climate change, with more extreme weather events, working with nature and allowing nature to build the cycles of fertility and resilience are going to help with that challenge. And each of us can do our part to achieve that. A passage that comes to mind when I think of landscape restoration is out of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah counsels to look for the ancient way, the good way, and walk in it. Walk in that good way, and good things will flow from that. And I think in my work, you know, wood landscape, I also realize that of the few things we have managed to learn, which we are thankful for, there's so much more we don't know, and so much more that is hidden in nature, that is a gift from God. And, you know, going to Genesis, when God created this world, He said it is good, and He charged us to care for it, to look after it. And that's what we need to do. It is good, and if we follow His way, if we walk in His path, then we'll fulfill His commandment and good things will flow from that. That's what I believe. So it's been a real pleasure to spend a few minutes with you, and thank you for that opportunity. Of course, here at D'Antonia, we always welcome visitors, so any of you that find yourselves in Australia, please come visit us, and look forward to meeting you. All the best.
Hola, mi nombre es Linda Shelley.
Hello, my name is Linda Shelley, and I work with Mennonite Mission Network in the area of Latin America. Today I have the privilege of interviewing Jaime Ramirez from the Iglesia Cristiana Menonita de Colombia. To begin, Jaime, we would like for you to present yourself, giving emphasis on your experience as a church planter. Well, my name, as you know, or if you don't, is Jaime Ramirez, pastor of the Mennonite Church of Suba. I think my experience as a church planter, I have the privilege of being the first Christian in my family. Well, my family previously, before, had a Catholic background, and so after my conversion, I can say with joy that my mother, my father, my wife, my children, and many people that I've had the grace to be able to communicate with them the message of Jesus Christ. And this is how it begins. Then, in the Mennonite Church, fundamentally in Teusaquillo, I became the one in charge of the ministry of evangelism and discipleship. We opened up our house when we lived near Teusaquillo for a prayer group and Bible study. And this group was with neighbors and part of the church, but surprisingly, this group began to grow a lot, and the house wasn't very big, but we had 25, 30 people who were meeting together, and there I realized that we, together with my wife, had a call to open up new churches. And surprisingly, afterwards, there was a time of silence on the part of the Lord. And not from one side or another was there a proposal for opening up a new work. And so I prayed to God and I said, Lord, if I don't have a call, you know that I'm a business person. You know that all my life I've been involved with sales. So guide me to do a project that has to do with giving work to people. Well, there wasn't a response from anywhere. And one time in public transportation, an inhabitant of the street, as I say with respect, but he had a message that was like something of culture. And then afterwards, he explained to me that he had some university studies. Today, he attends Teusaquillo, and he gave a message, and I had said to the Lord, I'd like to work in your work, but direct me. And at the end of the message, he said goodbye, and he sat down on the steps, and I said, well, your message was very good, just that you're lacking, we have a word in Colombia, perengue, energy, emotion. And so I said, you're lacking that. And he said, yes, Pastor. And I didn't focus on that. And just at the end, when I was going to buy some things for my business with my wife, that is to make company work clothing, and I was going to get off the bus, and I said, don't forget to give the message, perenque, this high energy. And he said, yes, Pastor. And I said, well, why do you say pastor to me? And he said, because you're a pastor of God. And so then I got down from the bus and I said, thanks to God, because God works however God wants and opens the doors for the opening of a church. And then after talking with Pastor Peter Stuckey, he said in the neighborhood of Soacha there was a feeding center. It's still there. And they were meeting in a social work, 7 or 8 people, but they hadn't ever thought of establishing a church. And so Pastor Peter said, go there, Jaime. And so I went, and my wife, who still didn't believe much in this, but we began to visit, and Linda, the support from God was great. There were people who were healed from cancer, and they began to come to the church, and the church was being formed. And well, this is really the genesis of this feeling of call, the pastoral call to open up new churches. Thank you. I see that you had quite a bit of experience when you decided to participate in the SENT program from Mission Network. In what way did this experience serve for you to participate in SENT? Well, we were lacking a bit, maybe, and certain literature that would give clarity. And so this course, these workshops guided me in this sense of, well, for the 5 ministries, where to place the people, like scientific questionnaires. In the case of opening up a church, or with whom we'd open it, and the means of doing it, the means to replant, in the case of needing to replant the church, or even to close it. And so more like scientifically and with steps that were calculated, because believe me, Linda, when I began, I didn't have such calculation or ideas. It was more empirical than prepared. And so this serves because the idea is that the church in Suba, that's a daughter of Teusaquillo, that it can give birth to new church plants. And so now I have tools Now we have tools because from here forward in August, we're going to have the same scent workshop, and now we have 12 people signed up from Suba to learn in this process. And so definitely it's very useful and has a lot of learning. Thank you. I know that your background as a business person has served also in planting churches. I'd like to hear more about how you combine being a business person with being a church planter. Well, at present in the church, the productive project that has to do with planting the church is that a professor from an institution from the government, they charged us, they taught us how to make yuca bread with and without cheese, pastries, and cakes, other things. And we paid them to teach us, and we had about 7 people who learned. And of these 7, there are 2 that remain with this project. And so this project, we're working 1 or 2 times a week. And with this work, we sell 150, 170, 180 products, and now we bought for our little coffee shop a cappuccino machine and glass cases, a toaster, and now we have the oven and other things for our business of the Mennonite Church in Suba. And we have other projects, many projects, and so we're making progress. Thank you, Jaime. You recently took a step of faith buying a property. I recall that in order to achieve this, you put forth a lot of effort, and you also sought connections with other people who were encouraged by your vision. How do you see the property now, and how do you think it will serve the church? We began to knock on doors. One of the things that most impacted me in the ministry of displaced people at the Teusaquillo Church is that there were a number of people who were driven off their land, and various of these people went to the United States and to Canada, mostly to Canada. And one of them, I remember, well, I won't say the name, but when she arrived, I was talking about forgiveness, and she said, "Brother, come over here." And she said, "Have you seen your family killed in front of you? Have you lived with cardboard over in the street? Have you passed through times of hunger?" Well, all of this surprised me, and I said, "Sister, no, I haven't experienced any of this. Forgive me, but the only thing I can say is this, that forgiveness is a supernatural act in which God gives the capacity to do it." Well, then she continued attending. Her family and even a man received her with her 5 children and went with her to Canada. And in Canada, they talked about our church, and a missionary came from Canada who brought money for this project. So all that we plant is not in vain, and all that we sow in one way or another gives fruit. And so organizing, selling meals, we were able to bring together 250 million pesos for the first quota. And now the rest of the money was loaned to us, always with the understanding that we're going to sell the lot that we have, and that will help us to pay the rest of it. But more than anything, it's an act of faith. It's an act, in this case, the Mother Church saying, this has feet, this has hands, and the most important thing, this has God. And so we are going forward. This is it. And of course, with your help too, of course. So yes, it's an act of faith, and also it's a way of giving participation to the people, as much the people there in Suba as also people who now are in other countries, but to remember with a lot of love your work there. Is there anything more that you'd like to say? Well, I have a lot of concern, Linda, about learning about starting businesses. I don't know if this is the work of a seminary or not, probably not. But with, I would like, with McDade, which is an institution of social development, the Mennonite Church, we have for the second semester many workshops on business starts. For example, in the church, there are mothers who are heads of households, one of the 6 children, one of the 4, and they're all very hardworking. But how good it would be if we could say to them, well, life is very, very expensive. The cost of the daily food basket is very high. How good it would be if the church, in addition to this project, if there could be another 3 or 4 or 5 projects. Well, we have so many plans, and this place is 360 meters squared, but we could build it up 5 stories, and how we could teach people job skills. And this is a concern that I have, and I don't know who could collaborate with us on this, because as with the seminary, we have courses about peace and theology and biblical questions. The communities need to learn to be self-supporting. And so this is what I would like. And then that when I go, that we can see that there are some churches that are self-supporting. And so that's what I would say. Thank you, Jaime. And it's a challenge, a very big challenge, and we'd like to walk together. It's a great privilege to be able to walk with you in Colombia. And many blessings to you, and also many greetings to the brothers and sisters there in the church in Suba. Thank you for taking us into account. For us, it's a privilege that you have visited us and continue thinking of us. A hug. May the Lord bless you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sharon Norton from Mennonite Mission Network, and I'm pleased to have Lionel Nkosi with me today. He is coming to us from Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. I hope I said that right. And he has been a very good friend. He and his wife, Sazi, have been very good friends of Mennonite Mission Network and Africa Inter-Mennonite Mission for many years through relationships, primarily in Francistown, Botswana. But he has recently moved back to Zimbabwe, which is where he's from. And so he'll tell a little bit about his story. And but our main topic today is to talk about networking for the kingdom through discipleship and holistic ministries and church planting. What are some of the main principles about missional discipleship that really transformed your ministry? Could you explain what those are?
That the church had actually forgotten that Jesus is the center of everything, you know. And I find that the church had completely misplaced or forgotten, you know, the ways of discipleship, much taken from Deuteronomy 6:4-6, Jesus as the Lord and the King and the center of everything. I find that is one of the biggest principles that the church had misplaced and forgotten. And, you know, raising disciples that make other disciples, you know. So I found that is one of the key things, like for me, that when we started, we looked and we had to look within ourselves and look at how we have been doing things. And one of the first things was just us having misplaced the discipleship ways according to the Bible.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure that's sort of a to take that kind of inventory of yourself and your ministry and to come to that realization, wow, we're missing, a main basic principle thing. You get caught up in many other things about Christian living, but yeah, disciples following Jesus and those disciples making disciples as well. So yeah. And how did you work at that in your church? How did you start training people as disciples and training them to bring other disciples?
Yes, I think the first key thing was to go back to the foundations, go back to the basics. Like I said, that Jesus being the foundation of everything, and focusing on the good news and the good news of Jesus Christ, not just, the good news in a passive way. And because passive leads to vendor of religious good. So I realized that we had spent most of the times as a passive church in terms of just doing religious good things, or I can say offering good services, which was something that was completely out of line, rather than sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. So we started off with the leaders, where we took back our own leaders to the basics, that it's all about the mission. It's not all about us being vendors. When you become a vendor of religious good or just offering good services, it's all about making sure that the chairs are well set up, nice speakers, nice things set up there, and making everybody to be comfortable. And we first started to say, everything has to start around leadership. And we said we have to point people back to Christ and understand that it's all about mission, and mission is about going out. Those principles of saying, what does the Bible say about us going out rather than offering good services and making everybody comfortable? So we had to teach that first to our leaders and walk step by step with our leaders, because we had a mission to raise leaders who would become like Christ and carry the mission of the good message of Jesus, so that they become the disciples of Jesus, not the disciples of Lionel and Sazi, and disciples of the Rock Christian Church, because it's not about the name of the church, it's about the name of Jesus Christ, which is the center of everything. So when we took the leaders and they understood that, it was an exciting journey of about 8 weeks with them, having to take them through simple gospel of Jesus Christ.
Wow, that's amazing. You're starting to preach too. I'm starting to feel the fire. Anyway, this is great. And so you also decided to really take the message and go out and not just expect people to come to you. And, that's that missional, incarnational impulse that drives us out with the gospel of Jesus. So you took this message to some schools and some villages and combined it with holistic ministry. So can you describe that for us?
Yes, so basically we moved from focusing on the programs of the organization, because it just became more about the program of the organization, how we want just things to be done, and it moved away from systems and programs, and it moved away from going to the field to teach the good news, not offering good services. So after we had sat down and walked through our leaders, we then started small cohorts around the city led by these new disciples. They have been leaders in the church, but the understanding of mission has been misplaced of the good news of Jesus Christ. So we took that and we had small groups, because the focus was no longer bringing people to a comfort zone, because the mission is out. And previously, it was more about bringing people to the building. And we realized that, and we started actually a series that was called Church Beyond the Walls, because we had first to teach our leaders not to see the walls as the mission, because now we are bringing people into the walls, and then the harvest is not in the walls, the harvest is in the field. You don't harvest in the building, you harvest beyond the walls. So when we moved away from programs, because programs create control, it's all about control. It's all about the name of the organization. It's all about the principles of the organization. It moves from teaching the good news, and it just becomes about stories, good stories that people need to hear, and people are having itchy ears on hearing about the, good stories, and moving away from the gospel of Jesus. So we started these small groups, and then they started also teaching the same principles of Jesus Christ, and making Jesus to be the center of everything, and understanding that we're having to raise disciples that become more like Christ, not more like Lionel, not more like leaders, more like Christ.
Amen. Amen. Whew. Yeah. And so you did this. You took it to a boarding school, and you also took this message to villages, and you combined it with some other material aid and practical help. Can you talk about that?
Yes, so we actually combined it with other programs, like going out there with food basket programs, and also going out with clothing program. But one of the things that we did and made sure that people understand, we didn't want to start a food program, and we didn't want it to be a cloth program, because that only addresses the stomach issues. It's only just the temporary, but the gospel of Jesus, it is everlasting. So when we went there, as much as we took this, we still made sure that people have an understanding that God is a good God. He will take care of you. What's important is his word. So what we give out is not the most important thing, because you eat the food today, tomorrow it's gone. But when you receive the word of God, it stays with you. It allows you to share it with the next person. It gives hope. And, hope is not for today. Hope is for tomorrow. But today we have to act on the faith, of the word that we have been given. So we leave those people with the hope of tomorrow, and that Christ is with them today, and they have the hope that tomorrow they will make it because they have Christ with them, rather than them focusing that we are going to come back. Because when they focus on us coming back, what if we don't? What if we don't honor? So we taught those principles to ensure that people understand that Christ is for all cultures, for all nations, young and old. So everybody has to understand that principle, that this is for all, it's not just for the few.
Amen and amen to that. That was, that was great. Thank you so much, Leonel, for sharing with us, and blessings to you and Sazi and your two little boys as you make your life and live your faithful discipleship in that place. And as you are such a blessing to so many people, and for this vision that you have to share. And I look forward to our future collaborations. We've got some things in the works with some pastors and leaders in South Africa to bring missional discipleship training to them as well. So we just pray that God would provide for you and for all the people that you touch as well. So blessings on your ministry. And thank you so much for sharing this inspiring message with us and with the Mennonite world community.
Thank you so much, Sharon.